about now? Rock and roll. Let's try that again. Good evening, everyone. Hi, everyone at home. And thank you for being here. For the folks in the room, you have this special privilege of asking questions. I tend to answer most of the questions that you will probably have. But if something comes up, especially towards the end, feel free to ask. If you have questions along the way, I'm more than happy to answer them. But usually as we go, I tend to answer most of them that you're probably going to have. I've done this a couple of times. I usually have a fairly decent idea of what everyone's going to be asking. So without further ado, and to get you all back to doing whatever you're doing this evening, let's get started. We're living in some interesting times, and I think most of us as parents try to keep the news from our kids. How old are the kiddos for you that are in the room? How old are your kids? Kinder? A lot of kinder? Seventh? Oh, 7 and 5, yeah, yeah. 11, yeah. 5, yeah. So most of us have some of the younger ones, and I'll address a lot of that as well. But, you know, kids today are, I think, a little bit more aware of the world than ever before. And no matter how much we try to keep the news from them, they somehow figure it out. I know after the couple of recent issues, a lot of parents were like, hey, we go get pizza, and it's on in the TV in the pizza parlor, right? Before we're able to, ask someone to turn it off or not see it. And this question, right, Mommy, what would happen if a stranger got in my school, comes from a 4-year-old. This is from one of our industry partners. And, for our kids, right, strangers are all bad, right? Strangers, those are the bad people. And for kids, especially younger kids, they are not aware of the world like we are. Right? They have no idea what's going on. So in their world, what they're seeing on the news and what they may be hearing from friends or whatever, to them it's strangers, right? That's the closest they can kind of connect. And as a parent, how do you answer this, right? How do you answer without loss of innocence? How do you answer it to where it makes sense for them, right? To lower fear, but also maybe instill a little confidence, right? We know as they get older, it doesn't really get any better. This question, right? Choose a modern day problem and create a hero to solve it. This was a 7th grade writing assignment. This was from my English teacher. This is actually a family friend of ours. This is not one of our schools. And she reached out after this. She goes, they could have written, they could have drawn, they could have done anything that they wanted. And she goes, what I tend to get are things like this: school violence and the adventure of the school savior. And as kids get older, they get a little more aware of the world. They're getting in more information. They're having a hard time processing the world around us. I think even as many of us in this room and those at home, processing what's going on in the world around us. And as they get older, it really doesn't get any better. And this comes from a high school junior. This was during our high school pilots a few years ago. And this particular high schooler, she goes, look, guys, we've never had a problem at our school, right? We've never had a shooting. We've never had anything like that. But we've been on lockdown 2 or 3 times because there's police activity in the neighborhood. I turn on the news and I see kids that look like me at schools that look like ours that are dealing with this problem. And she goes, and this high school junior goes, and I grew up with it. She's like, from the time I was this big, I grew up having to practice turning out lights and locking doors and doing things that I didn't understand why I was doing it. And, when we talk about, when it comes to school safety, and we look at the problems that we're facing today, this is not the only time that we've had this problem in schools. And I'll give you a little pop quiz. I know it's a Monday evening. It might be a little late for a pop quiz, but does anybody know the last time a student was hurt or killed by a school fire in school? I am so proud that no one pulled out their cell phone and started to Google it. If I asked the same question, if I asked you when was the last time a student was hurt or killed by school violence, we could probably fairly safely answer probably today, last week, right? Somewhere, whether it's publicized or not, something probably happened on a school campus. The reason that we don't remember this is because it was, a heck of a long time ago, 1958. In 1958 was the last time that a student was hurt or killed by a school fire. Now, if you look at that number, 92 children that day, that's an offensive number, even by today's standards, that 92 kiddos perished that day on something that presumably could have been preventable, right? There was a number of issues and things that led up to this, but we look at what we've done to solve it, right? Like the things that we have changed in schools. Well, if you think about it, right, we practice the fire drill every month. We have signs even in here, exit, exit, exit. There's fire alarms. We have sprinklers in classrooms, right? They have fire extinguishers. And, when I talk to teachers, I go, you have to imagine, place yourself as a teacher back then, right? It's late 1950s. You're driving to school and you see construction vehicles after this horrific news, and they're installing fire extinguishers and they're installing fire hoses. And from a teacher perspective, you're going, well, wait, whoa, hold on, time out. You expect me if a fire breaks out, that I'm going to leave my classroom, I'm going to go grab this fire hose, and I'm going to run back down the hallway, I'm going to put a fire out with this fire hose. And now you're also telling me that every month I have to practice a fire. I have to take time out of my instructional schedule every single month to practice a fire drill. I don't think so. And it's funny how times have changed, but the issues necessarily haven't, because when we bring the issue to modern times, very replicatable is school violence with the same type of questions. Teachers like, you expect me to go do this or do that. You expect me to operate like, some SWAT operator or some, police officer, and I have to have all this specialized training, and then we have to do all these drills, and we have to do all this stuff. Same thing, but obviously something that's very different. When it comes to school safety, we kind of predicate school safety on what we call the 3 pillars of school safety. And I'll start on the left, right, with the physical pillar. And when I say that, it's all the things that we can see. It's cameras, it's door locks, it's the fences, it's all the things that we can see. It's the visitor management, when you get a little ID, visitor tag when you come to visit. It's all those things. And these are the things that we can see and that we can feel, we can touch, we can install, right? I'm going to jump to the right side, the culture. And I will tell you, we are at a lot of schools across the country. We're in 16 states, a lot of Lutheran schools across the country. And I will tell you, being on faith-based campuses, especially Lutheran faith-based campuses, the culture is fantastic. There's a very common bond. Issues, family problems, kiddos that are struggling, all these things tend to be solved pretty quickly, avoiding and preventing what we've seen in some other places where kiddos start to spiral into these concerns. And so usually most schools do really good at the two. They have really good physical stuff, and we have a really good school culture, right? Where we tend to fall short is that middle, right, is that knowledge. Like, so how do we do good drills without your kindergartners coming home and crying, right? How do we talk to kids about this? How do we do something that actually makes sense and isn't incredibly scary? And that's where we say the H.E.R.O program really comes in, is to bridge kind of this gap of knowledge that we've had for so long. Because before now, there's usually 3 things that schools have had to be faced with. And I'll start kind of in the upper left, right? The upper left is the school, principal, vice principal. Someone had to figure out how to do a drill. And while our school leaders are fantastic folks, they're great at leading educators and kids, they're not necessarily certificated in safety, right? And so left to their own devices, trying to do the best they can, they don't always necessarily maybe do the best possible thing for safety issues and for security issues. Or we engage local law enforcement. I'm here to tell you, Tustin PD is a fantastic police organization. However, most police officers are not necessarily kid-friendly, nor they're teacher-friendly. And so a lot of the training is predicated on military or law enforcement style training, stress inoculation training. And a lot of times they are good at the basics and getting you kind of into the room, so to speak, about these topics, but they don't necessarily go into the weeds. They don't necessarily are able to or willing or can answer some of the things. And a great resource, but maybe not always the best solution, or somewhere in between, right? The upper right. Off-duty or retired law enforcement or military, teaching some version of something, but in the same style and methodology, right? Stress inoculation, scary. Let's fire some blanks off. Let's bang on some doors. Let's do, we have to, really train like we trained in law enforcement. And as we know, and as I'm sure many of you have seen, and why you're probably tuning in, are things like this. Are we doing more harm than good? And something statistically speaking is not very likely, especially on school. Are we doing more harm than good by even talking about it? And I would argue up until recently, probably, if not yes. You, I'm sure, have heard the stories about kids coming home crying, if not your own. How do you talk about it? There's some version of something going on. As a parent, it's super scary, but imagine for the kiddos, right? Like all the other things that they have to learn, and now we have to settle them with this. And that's really where we wanted the H.E.R.O program to come in, as a way to kind of bridge the gap between the scary stuff, but also how can kids actually feel safer and actually be safer. So my name's Adam. I come from a 20-plus year law enforcement background right here in Orange County. I was a police officer in Orange County for Since the until just a few years ago, I served on our active shooter team for the majority of my time. I worked domestic counterterrorism as it relates to active shooters. I've been talking about school violence and school safety and all the bad things since about the mid-2000s. And in 2015, I was teaching across the country active shooter stuff. I was teaching for my police department active shooter stuff. And I was in downtown Los Angeles at a private K-8 school, actually very similar to this. And I got done doing the previous slides. We were shooting teachers with Nerf guns, and we were showing them scary police shootout videos, and we were doing all the things that how we would train other cops, but probably not how we should have trained teachers, and in no way, shape, or form should we be doing that with kids. And I get all done, 4 hours of training, and this teacher raises her hand, and she's in the back of the class. She goes, "Excuse me, Adam, excuse me, quick question. Really liked your course, but I can't tell my third graders anything you just told me. Not a thing. So what would you suggest I tell my kids? Because it's going to be Murphy's Law. It's going to be a pickup, drop off, recess, substitute teacher, passing period. Something's going to happen, and we're not going to be in the four walls of our classrooms where we can lock the door and turn out the lights and whatnot." And I go, "That's a great question. I have no idea. Couldn't tell you." And I didn't think anything of it because I'd never got that question before. And over a decade or so of doing active shooter stuff at the time, I hadn't really ever gotten that question. 2 weeks later, I had a 5th grade teacher. Same thing. "Hey, how do I tell my kids this?" And I go, "I really don't know." So I contacted the organization I was working for at the time. I said, "Do we have anything?" And they go, "Nope, not a thing. We don't talk to kids. We don't do that. We have this little book on Amazon, but that's really don't address it." Okay, fine. And then about 6 months later, I respond to a middle school active shooting event at lunch with 700 kids, where 2 gentlemen jumped the fence in fatigues and dark clothing and backpacks and charged the school at lunch with weapons. Where do you think all the teachers were that knew what to do? Yeah, not there. They were eating lunch. So 700 kids were left to their own devices at lunch to figure out what was going on. I was the first officer there about 2.5 minutes into this thing as part of our team. And I get out. As I come into the school, it is every bit of chaos you can imagine. Kids are on the overhangs. Kids are in restrooms. Kids are everywhere. They're on the roof. They're in the parking lot. It was pandemonium. And as I was there working through the problem, in my head was the voice of that 3rd grade teacher. Like, how do we talk to our kids? And amongst all the other things that were going on, I realized, I'm like, we might be missing our audience here. Like, the kids that probably really need to know what to do, because here we are with a bunch of kids, something happened, no one knew what to do because all the people who did were not here, they're all eating lunch. And that was really kind of the birth of the H.E.R.O program. And what we set out to do, this is in 2016, was could we teach a kindergartner how to stay safe and do it in a way that was not scary, that was age appropriate, and actually made them feel a little bit safer. That's how we set out. And now here we are 7, 8 years later. What you see up there are some of the different images. And I'm going to show you a bunch of imaging and stories throughout the evening, so you're going to kind of see what it looks like at different grade levels. The upper left is K3, kind of the middle is the upper elementary 4, 5, and then the right hand is the kind of middle school, high school, kind of graphic novelish type stuff. For the little ones, so if you have preschool, TK, even young kinder, H.E.R.O looks a little something like this: hide, escape, run, obey, and obey right away. For the little ones, all we're concerned about is that they listen to you as a parent or their teacher to whatever you tell them. And I'm going to come back to this in a little bit, but the idea is before the tears and the fears all set in, something scary starts to happen, they listen to you and you get out, you get away, you get whatever it is that needs to happen, whether it's here in their classroom, out in the playground, with you at home, with you in the mall. It's really built around good classroom and student management, especially at school, that carries on into the home, and I'll talk about that in just a minute. The whole idea of the H.E.R.O program is this. We wanted really good natural responses to fight, flight, or freeze. When that kind of fear, that danger sets in, doesn't matter what it is, let's give them some really good strategies on what to do in order to stay safe. Doesn't matter what it is. Because I think many of you are here not to hear me, not to talk about my story, the background, or the program. You're really here for this. What are your kids going to learn? You might notice I have not said the word yet, things like active shooter, active threat, active killer, because none of that's in there. We don't talk about guns. We don't talk about politics. We don't talk about weapons. We don't ever say gun, active shooter, active threat, active killer. No one dies in any of the stories. Does it create trauma? Is it scary? From the kids? No, and that's coming from the kids. Loss of innocence, does it inspire these things? These are all the questions that I get. And I can sum all this up with really one answer: no. The way that we talk about and the way that we work through a lot of this is I don't really care what it is, right? We talk about invaders and intruders, and they're actually villains in our stories, and they're superhero stories, which I'm going to show you here in a minute. But the idea is it is a school safety program, yes, but it's also really more of a life skill safety program that they take beyond the walls of the classrooms, because guess what? You all have homework too with the program. There's homework for you all. I'm going to talk about that in a minute. But the idea is I want kids to have really good ways to keep themselves safe if they feel they're in danger. It doesn't matter what the danger is. The odds that they're going to run into an active shooter, either at school or in life, are very small. The odds that they might run into or think there's some sort of violent event, a fight breaks out, a gang shooting, you name it, right? That is much more common. And the HERO response and the skills that they learn now and as they continue to get older carry with them for those types of things. Did you guys grow up in California? Or in California? If the ground was start to shake right now, what do we do? Bingo, right? Duck and cover, stop, drop, and hold, right? Get underneath the desk, right? Fire alarm goes off, right? Since we were this tall, we learned very basic things on how to stay safe. This is just kind of another part of that. So we don't talk about guns. We don't take a political side. What I essentially say is I go, look, the world is kind of a scary place. I can't change it, but I can make you and your kiddos a little bit safer in it. Doesn't matter what type of weapon we're talking about. We don't have any shooters in there. No one gets shot with anything. A couple of our invaders, one's evil eye. He's got like evil laser eyes. One guy has like I'm going to date myself, a Sonic the Hedgehog kind of looking thing. It shoots green slime goo out of it. So it's stuff like that, stuff that they're used to seeing. So we have there's no guns or any other stuff in there. No one dies. It's built upon empowerment theory, which I'll touch on in a little bit, but essentially everything's got winning language, winning outcomes, everything's positive, and finding ways to kind of to turn the table, so to speak, on our villains, which we'll see in a little bit for our elementary kids. Creates trauma, loss of innocence. Again, we're talking about superhero stories. So if your kids watch any sort of Marvel, Disney, Star Wars, any of that stuff, same plot lines, same concepts, same storylines, so it feels very familiar to them. It's stories that they feel, obviously our characters are different and all that stuff, but the plot line and how the stories progress all feel very, very similar. The only difference with ours is that they actually get to use their special superpowers, which I'll touch on here in just a minute. So for the teachers, and so we've already conducted the training here. The teachers have all gone through a 2-hour professional development course on the HERO concepts, how to use them, how to teach them, what it means for the school, what it means for them. So they are very well versed in HERO concepts. So I always like to lead with that the teachers are prepared. They've all been through the training. Post the training, the actual program is 5 lesson plans. Preschool is 4. It's just the hide, escape, run, obey lesson plans, and they're short. They're about 15-ish minutes or so. But from kinder on up, there are 5 lesson plans. All the elementary is hide, escape, run, overcome, and then all together. So you're going to hear things like HERO Week. One of the things we recommend is 1 lesson a day over the course of 5 days, so like Red Ribbon Week and all the other kind of awareness weeks. That last day, that all together, is a choose your own adventure story. So the teacher goes through the story, stop, what do you go? Oh, we would run, or we want to escape, or we want to do this or that. So we're checking kind of for understanding as they go. For the middle school, 6, 7, and 8, it's prevention, hide, escape, run, overcome. So they learn the 7 behavioral signs, the warning signs that their friends or their peers may be going into some crisis. There may be something that's lurking that let's get them some help ahead of time. Let's talk about it. Let's find the resources before things go incredibly wrong. And so at that age group, they have a little bit different, but then they go into their hide, escape, run, overcome. And I'll talk about how they learn that in a minute. I mentioned it's built upon empowerment theory. We also built upon English language arts standards, so we're not having to add a bunch of extra time to the school year. They use it during their English language arts time, so we're meeting the standards as we go. The other thing that we include is a student accessibility guide. So really to adapt and modify the program to all ability kids. So we talk about students on the spectrum of autism, sight and sound impairment, cognitive impairment, functional access needs, adaptations and modifications, so that way all students can learn how to stay safe and work through the programming as well. How do we actually teach it? Well, I talked about those lesson plans. The lesson plans the teachers have, those are abutted by student-facing materials, Venn diagrams, and pictures and stories. Preschool through 5th grade has narratives. So the little ones, the preschool and TK, get a very simple story about their day at Metro City Hero preschool and how they stay safe at their little preschool. That's all they get. Once you get into K through 3, our stories are Path to Empowerment and Young Heroes Overcome. And that is a little bit more of the superhero story. So again, they're at Metro City Hero School, and their teachers are real-life superheroes, teaching them all their special hide, escape, run, overcome superpowers, but of course you have to have a villain. And so our villains show up, and they use their hide, escape, run, overcome superpowers to thwart the villain and save the day. As they get older, in the 4-5, that becomes a chapter book, so they get a little bit more stories and plots about all the characters. And then into middle school, it becomes much more scenario and problem-based. So for those kiddos, they get a little bit of a story. They're at a football game on a Friday evening. They're at the mall with you guys. They're hanging out after school, and then something happens. Stop. What do we think? Right? What do we want to do? Let's break out. Then they break out into groups. They have fact sheets. We talk about myths versus facts. We talk about all these things. They get to work through the problems themselves, and then actually teach back a little bit what they talked about in their groups and how to solve the problem. They come back into the story, and they learn that what they just learned and talked about, how actually that works to get them out of the dangerous situation, and then we talk a little bit about what that dangerous situation was. So a little bit of a life cycle through each of the different lessons that they go through. Everything is age-specific language. So every group or every age level has different language, different imaging, different books, different lessons, different activities, all by age. And so the big thing about the program is it was developed by a multidisciplinary team. So it was law enforcement, educators, and school psychologists. So we brought a team together for law enforcement for all the law enforcement stuff, but then really the teachers and the school psychologists to put it all together in something that really made sense for teachers, and it was age appropriate in the learning and the pedagogy as they go. So let's talk about what it actually really looks like inside. Here is your preschool TK. And for kinder, we let the teachers kind of choose which one they want to use. It works kind of both ways. Some kind of interchange them. So this is Metro City Hero Preschool. So let's talk about things like the obey command, right? So obey, obey, obey right away. That's a special key term for them because it's not something they're going to hear a lot. It's still something at their age that they understand. It becomes a little bit of a vocab word. But when they hear it, they know they have to stop, look, listen, and respond either to their teacher or to you as their parent or their trusted adult. So it's a little hard to see here, but that upper left-hand corner, parents and teachers are the ones that I trust, and I always listen without argue and fuss. And so we talk about who do you trust, who you're going to hear this from. The next most scary thing for little kids, well, when the lights go out, right? Kids afraid of the dark? Yeah. The number one most traumatizing thing when it comes to any sort of lockdown drill or any sort of school safety drill is not the topic, is not any of that. It is when the lights go out. That's when the tears and the fears set in, especially if kids are not used to seeing their classroom in the dark. And so we talk about one of our young little heroes here. It says, when we hide, Miss Kara, who is their real-life superhero teacher, turns the lights out so we can't be seen. Hiding can be dark and scary, but you'll be fine. People can't hurt what they can't find. And what we talk about is, yes, hiding in the dark can be scary, but when we hide together, it's actually super safe. It's like playing a game of hide and go seek. Some kids have actually gone, wait a minute. So what you're telling me is that the night light in my room actually helps the monster in my closet see me better. We're getting rid of that night light. Right? So I've heard a number of stories where kids are like, nope, we don't need that night light. We're good. We can keep the door open a little bit so I have a nice escape route out of here in case the monster jumps out, but we're good. So again, it really talks about, and we address the kiddos' fears specifically at their age group. And that was a big thing for us because the tears are not because of the topic, it's when the lights go out. It's when certain things happen, because again, when you're this big, your fears are a little different than all of ours. So we talk about escape, and so again, it's a little story about how they go through their school, and then the lesson plans and activities are budded, so they have play-based learning that they get to practice these skills, and there's like little leaderboards, and they have hero leader badges, and they have little stars, and they have all kinds of things that feels like all the other types of things that they learn. As they get older into K3, that book gets a little bit more, a little bit interactive narrative. So again, we're still here at Metro City Hero School. That's Miss Wise, one of their teachers. And again, we talk about some of the safety concepts, hiding in safety triangles and building barriers and danger running and overcoming and all these other things. There's a lot of, a little bit of the social emotional learning, empowerment, all those types of things. So this is some of the imaging from some of those books. As they get older into the chapter books, we have Hero School, Legacy of Courage and Heart of Courage. And so again, here it's a little bit more chapter book. You can see the green goo ray blaster of Invader up there, talking about danger running. Here we talk about things like talking to strangers and breaking the rules. So things that, again, we teach our kids, right, all the rules that we're not supposed to break, we're not supposed to talk to strangers, all these things. Some of the things that they learn is when it's okay to break the rules, when you can run in the hallway when normally you wouldn't, when you can maybe leave campus and ask someone for help when maybe you normally wouldn't, right? They find all the times when it's okay to break the rules and when it's not. And they do it through kind of some of these stories following their young heroes. Into middle school, and I say into middle school and high school because we use some similar graphics, is again much more kind of like think, pair, share, break out in groups, dropping them into different scenarios. So when we talk about safety triangles and those things, it's all much more graphic novelish and kind of like comic book-ish type based. As they're learning and working through the concepts. So all those skills are applied, which means that, so they'll read about it, they'll talk about it, but then they actually get to practice it. And so for the younger ones, again, it's a little bit more play-based and activity-based learning. As they get older, it's a little bit different, but they are all practicing danger running and building barricades and all these different types of things. For the little ones, it gets to come to life, right? These are real-life skills that they get to use. And like the other superheroes that fly and jump and do all kinds of stuff that they can't do, this they actually do get to do. Again, there's hero leader badges, there's all kinds of rewards built into it. The other thing that we have, especially for elementary, is a lot of journaling. So they have a hero journal that they keep at the end. We give them writing prompts, so that way they can draw and they can write about, how they felt about being a hero. For the young kids, we have a feelings wheel. So at the end, we're checking in to see how they felt. Did they feel scared or excited or brave? So they get to point to different things. We're constantly checking in to make sure things are going and that they're kind of understanding and moving through things. And probably they get to talk and discuss and practice. So again, it's very interactive in the classroom. The other thing we provide is a drill and scenario guide, which means that at the end of Hero Week, and as they go on learning all the other amazing things they learn, at some point we have to do some drills, so the school-wide drills that are mandated. So instead of having a big theatrical, hyper-realistic drill that takes a lot of time, our drills are fast. They're about 5 minutes or less, and it's really a quick check-in to make sure that they're remembering their hero skills. We have a review lesson, so especially for a lot of like kinder, pre-K, the teachers will do the review lesson first. They'll reread the story real quick, remember our hero skills, okay. And now they have like a little game that they play that is actually the drill, but they're practicing their skills like a drill. And so we really tone down the drill, so the kids go through a drill. Most of the time they don't even realize it was a drill. They just think it was a little refresher of the hero lesson. What we hear a lot, especially from a lot of our preschools, is that this is the first time they've been able to run drills and the kids aren't crying. And they go home, and a lot of times the parents, unless the school had, tells them that the drill that day, they don't even know there was a drill because the kids aren't going home crying, they're not upset, they go home just like any other day. And so that one of the biggest feedbacks we get, especially for a lot of the younger grades, is that the kids aren't crying anymore. They don't seem scared anymore. They don't, because again, we're talking about not having the lights off. We're talking about reviews. We're doing different things that they're still learning, they're still completing it, but they're not so scared and ramped up about it that it's causing emotional distress. So, the other thing we have, especially for our faith-based schools, is a biblical appendix. What this is courage verses, biblical stories and scriptures around each of the hero skills, around hide, escape, run, overcome, and obey. And so the teachers can then apply it in the classroom, just like they infuse scripture throughout the other types of topics and everything else that they're learning this same way. So they can, what we have found is that really, again, brings down some of the fear and goes, oh, well, I can do this too. And so it really connects faith into the program as well. And this has been a big deal for a lot of our schools, especially in the first year where it's new for the parents, it's new for the kids, it's new for everybody, to really work through the concepts and really feel safe and be safe. Ready for your homework? Everyone at home? Here's the homework that you all have. There's a couple of components here. We have a parent companion guide, which essentially is a set of questions at different grade levels. So we break it up, preschool, elementary, and then middle school. When the kiddos go home after their H.E.R.O lesson, they are told they have to go home and talk to you and teach you how to danger run, talk about hiding spaces. So they get to show off their brand new learned H.E.R.O skills to you. We do this because of two reasons. Number one, it really connects a lot of the families into the program as well. Because what we have seen happen is that the kids know what to do, but the parents don't. So then when you're out at the mall or at a soccer game on the weekend and something happened, your kids are reacting and you're like, what? No, hold on a second, like, what's going on? We have about a dozen or so survival stories over the last few years of kids that have been through the program that have used their H.E.R.O skills in real life. We have one story at a school, and everything else is in the community. On the way home, on the way to, at soccer and sporting activities on the weekends, at malls, at restaurants. And what we have found is that the kids on their own will react and stay safe. The parents, not so much. The parents are usually in tow of the kids who are staying safe. And so a big part of the home program for parents is that you get to talk a little bit about that, the emergency planning at home. That you get to learn a little bit of our H.E.R.O skills along with your kiddos as well. And to have those substantive conversations at home about safety. And again, remember, we don't say shooter, active gun, none of that stuff. So it's not coming into the program unless someone at home is talking about it. Does it apply? Absolutely. But they're not going to come home with that concept. The way we talk about it for young kids is people who hurt and people who help. The very first lesson is a Venn diagram. All the helpful people in life are over here, all the hurtful people in life, and I will tell you it's everything from monsters, villains, Darth Vader, clowns. We've had all kinds of things up on that side. Anything recent in the news will also, most recently we had some kids talk about, there was a neighborhood where some prisoners had escaped recently from, I guess, the local jail or something. So when the kids are like, oh, the jail people that escaped, right? So you'll kind of see, the teachers tend to see where the kids fall on who they think harmful people are. And so we talk about, there's so many helpful, wonderful people in life. Occasionally there might be a harmful person. Well, what do we do to stay safe from them? Well, we have special superpowers, right? So we really, that's how we talk about it. So occasionally, some things in the news will come up, but it's one of several other types of harmful people that may end up on that list. And so the teachers really kind of work through the discussion, because the idea is we want kids to name their fear, but then let's give them strategies and things to get rid of that fear, to address that fear, to work through that fear. You may be asking, how has it worked? Well, like I said, we started in 2016. We are now in 16 states. We range from Hawaii all the way to New York. We're about 750,000 students through the program. We started our initial pilots in 2016, K-8. So we had 20,000 K-8 students in 16 to 17. 17 to 18. 18 to 19, we went into high school. So we had 8,500 student high school pilot. And then if you're a student of history, you might see the year 2020. The preschool program started in February of 2020, and we had exactly 3.5 weeks before we hit a little road bump in that. So it took a little longer to get that through. But like I said, we did year-long pilots. We have white papers and research written on all three, in-classroom observation, teacher feedback, all kinds of things. What we discovered, it didn't matter what grade level it was. From our littlest to our oldest, we had 2 replicatable results. And we heard about it in some interesting ways. So I always like to share what parents have to say. This comes from a 3rd grade parent. This parent is actually at another private Lutheran school, so this is a Lutheran school parent. She reached out and she goes, I got to tell you, I was really apprehensive about this. I wasn't really happy the school was doing it, but I understood. Until, and she has 3 kids at the same school. She goes, until her youngest came home, which at the time was in 3rd grade. And he goes, Mom, we got to get these stories. These are my favorite stories of the whole year. And he's retelling the stories to Mom. And we hear that a lot from parents, that the kids want to retell and show and talk about the stories. I hear a lot that regardless of the age, that it's their favorite stories of the year. And when I have asked a little bit more, especially the teachers, why are they saying it's their favorite stories? Because it's the only story that they get to become a part of. They get to actually practice and become part of the story, using the same skills, doing the same things that are in the school. And I hear that quite a bit. And while I can agree that, and I think we can all agree actually, we shouldn't be here doing this, right? The HERO program should not be a thing. Kids should not have to learn this. I should not be standing here. I should be doing something else, right? Probably still be a police officer or do something else. I should be doing something else. But that's not the world we were given. And if we know, especially now, with all the regulations and all the requirements and everything else, let's find, if we have to talk about it, let's find a good way to do it better than what we've done in the past, right? So I hear this quite a bit from parents, but the replicatable results were this. Number one is that we found that we dropped student anxiety. And at every grade level, from high schoolers all the way down to kindergartners. And what you would hear a lot, and this again is from another 7th grade parent, that it really kind of changed her life. Little context to this quote. This was right after the Parkland incident. So their school had used the program for about a year and a half. They were one of our original pilots and they then continued on there after the fact. They had done the lessons earlier in the year. Parkland happens in February. And what we also hear quite a bit is that when anything national happens or locally, something happens in the community, the kids all want to go back to the HERO stories. It ends up being a little bit of like a safety or security blanket for them because they're going back to the skills that they know how to stay safe. So the school had rerun kind of briefly the HERO lessons. They had done a review lesson. And this parent says, after Parkland, her daughter had seen it on television, and she was really afraid to go to school. And she was talking to her, it's not going to happen. It was on the other side of the country, dear. Like, it was a high school. You're in middle school, right? Nothing was really happening. School reruns the HERO, does a couple HERO lessons the following week, and she notices this change in her daughter. And daughter seems a little bit more perky, a little bit more apt to go to school. And she asked her in the car one day, like, what changed? And she goes, oh, Mom, it's probably not going to happen. But if it does, you just hide, escape, right over Cobb. Not a big deal. And she's like, I could have said that 2 weeks ago, and you would have been fine. Like, what? And so what we hear a lot is that it gives kids tools and strategies that they can apply, and they feel like they're now back in control. That was the biggest thing. Kids, instead of just hiding in the dark with nothing to do, when they're building barricades, when they're doing things, they feel like they're a little bit more in control, and they're actually doing things that help them stay safe. The other thing we saw was that teacher confidence went up. And we measured this a couple of different ways. In a pre-post test, so before the lessons, before the teachers had anything, we asked them how confident were they in some sort of event. Something happened, how confident were they? We asked them the same question, but now with students, right? You have your 21st graders. How confident do you feel that you would know what to do? About half of teachers said they felt confident by themselves. They'd had some sort of training around hide fight. Police department had trained them or something. But then when you added the kids in, only about 30% of them said they had any sort of confidence that if they were there, they could keep all their kids safe. So we asked the same questions after the HERO program, and what we saw was 100% of teachers said they felt confident or highly confident by themselves that they could stay safe and be confident. But they also, 100% said that they either felt confident or now highly confident with their students. And that was a really big qualifier for us, that especially elementary school teachers said that they really felt confident because now they knew that everyone was on the same sheet of music, for lack of better terms, and if they said hide or escape, that everyone would know what to do. They wouldn't have to try to shepherd and get all these kids to go while they were really being afraid. The older kids, though, middle school and high school teachers, we hear things like this, that they felt that they were now a stronger advocate for safety, getting more kind of adult questions in the class, that their own personal anxiety went down around the topic. Okay? And it's a scary topic. There's no two ways to shake it. It's a scary topic. And a lot of teachers, and now over the years of doing this, a lot of teachers that have been through our course, the training course, and have used the lessons, have actually had real life experience. They come from a school that they had a real life lockdown. They come from school violence in inner city and have really resonated with the program. And I said this from a high school math teacher, so that it just really made her feel more confident in how to answer these questions as they came up in her classroom, and in creating a platform and a safe environment to talk about it with their students, and something that felt like it really made sense. Over the years, we have garnered a ton of partnerships, and we continue those partnerships, everything from our law enforcement partners with the U.S. Secret Service, along with FEMA, our education partners are locally with Chapman University, great sweater, by the way, University of Massachusetts. So teachers can actually earn professional development units from the University of Massachusetts for teaching the program. We sit on a lot of advisory councils, a lot of advisory boards. We have industry partners. All this is to say is that we take that national reach from Hawaii to New York and everywhere in between, and we bring it to every single school. This program updates consistently. There's 2 complete sets of curricula. There's 2 stories at every single grade level. And schools have the option to flip-flop them every other year, so the kids get different stories every year. Some teachers find a favorite story that they like, and they really enjoy teaching that one, and they feel confident with that. But we update lesson plans, safety strategies, teaching hints and how-tos. We gather all this information, so that way every single school we're at has national knowledge base in making good decisions. On the way here today, I think I had 3 conversations from different school principals across the country asking questions about, okay, how are we going to do our drill? Hey, I have a question that came up in our safety committee meeting. How would you handle this? What are other schools doing about that? So we really operate as a knowledge base for school safety and bringing kind of the old Joe Friday, just the facts. We'll bring the facts and let's see what makes sense for each school community. So with that, our big 3 is we want really good trauma-informed training for the teachers so teachers can feel confident, feel safe, and also be safe with their students in teaching the program, in talking about the concepts. Really good curriculum and the student-facing components for your kids, right? Like, let's talk about it in a way that's meaningful, that makes sense, that isn't scary, and actually makes them feel a little bit safer. And then also, again, for our community. Because as we leave our school at the end of every day, and the kids go out and they run home to you, right? We hope that they come home a little bit smarter, right? Maybe a little bit more well-behaved. At least that's what I hope for mine. Like, what'd you learn today? Nothing. Okay, go back. Don't come home till you learn something, right? And that when they come home, on top of all the other things that they learn, that they have the ability now to feel a little bit more confident, to feel a little bit safer. So that way, when we're at our weekend soccer game and baseball games and all the other sports, and when they get a little bit older and you let them go to the mall with their friends and they get to maybe walk home from school and all these different things, that they now have schools that we can feel confident as parents that they know how to stay safe, that they know and can recognize, like, oh, this might be a hero moment. And we hear a lot from our teachers. We have our teachers that on their own personal time, on their weekends, have used hero skills for their own protection of things that have happened to them. Because at the end of the day, and kind of as I talked about earlier, for all of us who grew up in California, since we were this big, we were practicing how to stay safe from an earthquake. If you grew up in other parts of the country, the East Coast, tornadoes, hurricanes, floods, right? We've been learning in schools how to stay safe from things, natural disasters. Since the 1950s, we've been practicing how to stay safe from fires. And it's only really recently that we've now had to look at kind of that final part of safety is how do we stay safe from someone else trying to hurt us? I grew up in a time that this was not a problem. Everything that happened in school violence over the years has been a historical issue, and it didn't affect me. It affected me in my personal or in my professional career as a police officer. It did not affect me as a student. And in talking to students today, they're growing up in a totally different world than I did. And it becomes very clear, not only as a parent, but also when you talk to kiddos and they're like, it's on top of social media and phones. And I mean, my social media was playing Atari at home and then running and getting on the phone to tell your buddy about what you won in asteroids, right? Like that was the social media, and you told everyone at school about it. The kids today are growing up in a world that they have plenty of challenges. This is one that they really don't need. And so trying to, again, give them the skills and the tools to not only feel safe, but to be safe, to kind of put this out of their mind, to get back to what is actually really important, which is learning. And so I tend to leave with this quote from a teacher, who says, in her 22-year career in education, of all the things that she's taught, and at the time she was a mathematics teacher, that these are probably some of the most valuable lessons. And as she described it, really some of the most valuable life lessons that not only did she learn personally, but also that she was able to give to her students. That she goes, they're probably not going to use trigonometry and calculus and all the other things I'm teaching them. Unfortunately, are probably at some point going to use these skills. So with that, I will take questions from the folks that are here. This is my contact info. For those of you at home, if you had some questions I didn't answer, absolutely feel free to reach out. I do all my own stunts. I answer all my own emails. It's not a chat box. It's not AI. It's not an assistant. So if you don't hear back from me for a couple of days, it's because I'm going through writing emails. But our social media, we're not big social media folks, but there's some cool stuff on there. Our website that has all the parent companion guide stuff on it is on there. So with that, I will open up for any questions that are in the audience. Yes, ma'am. close. So for those of you at home, her question is, they learn a lesson a day during Hero Week, and then are they getting a refresher or reminder every month? Some schools do it that way. They do get, so you do get the one lesson a day over the course of 5 days, and then the refreshers or reminders, we recommend a minimum of 2 drills. So, Hero Week's coming up, I think, in early October for Red Hill. We say, okay, if you do Hero Week then, sometime right around the Christmas break, like before you leave for Christmas break, maybe we do a drill, just a little quick refresher, a little review lesson, run our drill, just a little check-in, make sure they didn't dribble out their ears and run away, and that, they're remembering the skills. And then a second drill right around spring break is what we recommend. So either before or after, again, just a check-in, make sure they remember their hero skills out of the drill guide. Some schools do a little mini refresher every month. My kids' school, not because of me, they on their own decide to do one every month, and it's literally as much as this. My daughter's in 8th grade, but last year when she was in 7th grade, her 7th grade teacher, at least once a month when the kids would come in, she'd be like, where are we gonna hide? And over there and over there. Okay, cool. Everyone good? All right. It was like literally that fast. You just do a real quick little touch on something that was going on. Hey, real quick, if we're in the bathrooms or outside, where are we going to go? And it was just a real fast little kind of check-in. This particular teacher really got pumped on the program. It worked really good in her classroom, so she really kind of ran with it a little bit. Not all teachers do that. Most schools will review maybe every couple months, a little check-in. It usually comes up because something happens, right? Something's in the news, something happens in the community, the kids want to talk about it, so sometimes it's more of a forced review because kids are looking to go back to it. But usually it's Hero Week, at least 2 drills, unless something else comes up and they want to go back to it. So hopefully that answers. Awesome. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am. Awesome. So 2 ways. Number one, they usually come in an email sometime before Hero Week. Not to put more work on Paul's plate, but and they're also on our website. So the K-5 and the middle school, high school is on the website, safekidsinc.com. If you click on families, they're the first 2 big infographics there. If you scroll down past that, there's a bunch of other stuff. How to talk to kids about violence, or your kids super safe thinkers. We have a bunch of just kind of extra stuff in there. The preschool one, because we're in a bit of a web redesign at the moment, are not on there, but we have them in email. All the teachers have them in the portal as well, so we make sure that we get them out ahead of time. That's a good question. Yes?
I remember that through this seminar you mentioned that anxiety and
Mm-hmm.
confidence a lot from the adult perspective. So what I'm thinking about, like for these, like the junior high or high school students, some of them they have started to access to the social media. So it's talking about like these violences recent years, they may have direct access to it. But for the younger ones, sometimes they get scared about that. It's because like their parents, sometimes when parents talking about those at home, they themselves like emphasize those keywords too much, and they emotionally impact the kids, right? So you're talking about not only the program is not only to get kids some muscle memories when they're facing these scenarios, but also try to get them emotionally ready, not to be too anxious and too scared during these scenarios, so that they can obey the instructors or someone schools coordinate those stuff. They can hide and be safe.
Mm-hmm.
Then, if so, for us, as parents, when we, for example, we see the news and we talk about like some conversations with other parents,
Mm-hmm.
the kids overheard what we have been discussing. How do we need to address these issues, and what kind of things we should try to forbid, to overstate, or to maybe we don't think it's exaggeration, but kids hear that and they kind of keep under these conversations when they overheard that, and they got emotional anxiety for this.
Great question. So to summarize for everyone at home, it's a bit of a traumatic topic, and the kids are learning essentially through the program ways to deal with it super early, so that way as they get older and they see it on social media, they have more access to it as they get older, not quite as traumatic. And we've seen that a little bit as kids have gone over the years through the program. They're like, yeah, it's a hero thing, whatever, right? It's not that they're dismissive, but it's not. They have more tools or better ways to deal with it as opposed to having nothing to deal with it. So that would be correct in the what you started earlier. But to your more direct point, how do you address it if kids are overhearing it in the home, right? So you're trying to keep away from it. You're talking to another adult. It goes on the news. They hear half a conversation. If you're anything like my kids, they hear half a conversation. They decide to fill in the rest with whatever they thought you said or what they think you should have said. And next thing you know, right, it's totally different than what you actually said. And that's a little bit of a harder question. So, again, as for many of us, especially for younger kids, you're trying to keep those conversations away. Maybe you send them up to bed and you think they're asleep, and as you're watching the news or you're having a conversation with your wife or your husband, or you have friends over, you're talking on the phone, and they're hearing it, right, even though you think they're sleeping. How do you go about dealing with that? And that's a harder one. One of the things I recommend is if kids are becoming aware of what's going on, right, that they're like, well, you talked about guns or shootings or something weird happened or, whatever the case may be, I always recommend ask your kid questions, right, to see where they are. And when I say that, it's like, well, so what have you, if they come home a little scared or something, so-and-so was talking about some shooting or this Uvalde thing or this Tennessee thing or pick your whichever incident. Go, okay, well, what did you hear, right? So let's see number one, how much knowledge they have of whatever is going on. And then usually the second follow-up question is, well, how do you feel about that? Or how does that make you feel? Okay, they could say, oh, I don't know. It doesn't really make me feel like anything. I heard it, and I didn't know if that was like scary or not, or should I be scared, should I not? Some will be afraid. Oh, it makes me feel frightened or it makes me feel scary because it happened over here, and could it happen here? And so one of the couple things we recommend is, number one, asking to see where the kiddos are, right, and their understanding of what's going on, how it makes them feel, but then also let them tell you a story, right? So in other words, how it makes them feel. So like, how could we stay safe? And especially after the H.E.R.O program, usually they're going to be talking about their real, their H.E.R.O skills, everything else. But a lot of times if you have part of the solution, if you work through with your kiddo part of the solution, like what makes them feel safe, like, how do we stay safe as a family, how you can use your H.E.R.O skills to stay safe, it starts to kind of turn the tide a little bit. The biggest thing, what I see most trauma, if the kids aren't watching the news directly, right, they're just getting snippets. They're hearing a little bit from mom and dad. Maybe they get a little snippet when they sit down at the restaurant and, something happened. They're piecing together what they think happened. So asking, well, what do you think? What did you hear? What do you think happened? How does it make you feel? Those types of things. You can start to judge kind of where they fall. One of the things I always reassure, especially as a parent, reassure is that, you're always going to be safe with us. We're always going to be safe at home, right? Reassurance, the safety bit, because for kids, the safety component is the biggest thing, right? When I say safety, that they feel safe and secure at home, they feel safe and secure at school, they feel safe and secure, I call it the big three, right? With you, at home, at school. Those are the big three. If they feel safe in those three areas, very high likelihood they're going to feel safe in general. Now, they might not like the monsters, they might not want to go to the water park because they're afraid of water, whatever the case may be, but the big three, where they spend the most amount of time, you want the lowest amount of anxiety and reaction to that, so that way they can be as calm as possible without the spikes of adrenaline and those types of things. So I always say it's cautious in what you talk about in the home, like when it talks about news, those types of things. We use in the program very language that is not specifically common. So like our villains are invaders and intruders, right? Not typically a really super common language. Occasionally, right, a kid will hear invader and they use invader in the home for something that means totally different, right? And so sometimes there's a little bit of a vocabulary switch, like, well, wait a minute, mom or dad said it means this. So every once in a great while, we were very specific in the language that we use to not attach it to anything else, but occasionally there's attachment of something else that has happened. And sometimes it takes just a little bit of time to kind of work through, like, what can mean this, it can mean this, it could mean this, it could mean this. One of the things in the lessons, we know that the world doesn't operate on H.E.R.O language. And so every hide, escape, run, part of the lesson is, while our young heroes use the word hide, what else might you be able to hear, right? Hide or lockdown or stay hidden, or so one of the ideas is attaching if you hear things and you think it might be a dangerous moment, different vocabulary to have an appropriate response or action, so that way they're only not reacting to hide, or they're not only reacting to escape. So we do work a lot on vocabulary to, again, try to reduce the ability of misconnecting concepts, especially for the little ones. But again, working through some of the trauma of what they're hearing. Sometimes you'll have no idea, and it'll come up in the H.E.R.O lessons. So they'll ask questions about certain things they've seen or heard on the news, and they kind of work through it with their teachers. So we've seen a little bit of that. That is a hard just because of trying to temper what you talk about at home and what you think they hear or they won't hear, but usually the best is start with the questions and, work through there. Yeah. So we have a long-winded answer, I know, but that was a kind of a complex question. Any other questions? Yes. Yeah. I got here at 4 o'clock today to do that very thing. So the initial professional development training we did about 4 weeks ago, I want to say, right around there. And so the teachers got all the basic concepts, right? All the fundamental concepts of how the program works, like where are safety triangles, where to danger run, where to do this, where to do that. So they have the foundational kind of functional skills. I was here today at about 10 o'clock when all the kids were out at recess, and we walked the outside when the kids are at recess, found some places that they can stay safe both outside and inside, worked through that whole thing. I came back at 4, and we just walked in the classrooms, finding safe areas in the classrooms, those types of things. So that way, and this is pretty lucky. Most of the rooms are designed pretty closely to the same, so it's kind of a cookie cutter model for the most part. So the teachers, and in that first year, they're always asking questions: is this safe? Is that safe? Our doors are always open, so all of our H.E.R.O experts, teachers can call us, send pictures, ask all kinds of questions, and we're there to, is really in that first year, especially to support. Once teachers go through like the first year, they kind of get in their rhythm and their groove, and they kind of make it their own, and then they get used to it because now they know this is where our safety triangles are, this is what's safe over here, this is what's safe over there, and so it becomes like everything else they teach. They kind of get in the rhythm, but that first year is always as they learn everything. And security and safety is a culture. It's ever evolving. I talk about the programs ever evolving. So we'll change and do a bunch of stuff, and then we practice and we start using it, and we find out, oh, actually, we need to change this gate, or we need to change the way this happens, or we need to change this. We had conversations today about how can we do things better, than what we're doing. So it's always an evolution of moving stuff along as we learn and learn more. And that's really, we talk about being partners in school safety with all of our schools, is that's part of what we do, that we check the safe spots. So we have recommendations. As things come up like, hey, if you guys have this or that, consider these following tips or things or whatever from what we're seeing, because we read all the debriefs, we read all the final reports, and extract out of that what schools need. We actually, next week, speaking of which, we are releasing essentially a version of a podcast that every couple weeks, we're pulling out some of the top stories and giving to our schools, hey, these are the things you need to think about if you haven't done it already. And so that's just kind of another one of those things to keep teachers and principals. And I was looking at my watch only because we're set to release either later this week or early next week. So we'll have the YouTube channel, we'll have all that other stuff. It'll be a video newsletter, for lack of better terms. But again, one of those things, keeping all of our schools, hey, this happened over here, think about these 3 things. This happened over here. So again, to keep it always top of mind. Any other questions? Awesome. Well, thank you for your time. Thank you at home. For those of you that are still around, be well, be safe. And like I kind of opened with, I can't change the world that we're in, but I can only make you and your kiddos a little bit safer in it. And as I say, welcome to the H.E.R.O family. And it's our honor, and we take it very seriously that we get to become a little bit of your family as well. So again, be well, be safe. Thank you all so much, and look forward to having your kiddos become the next generation of young heroes, as we say, creating a generation of safe thinkers that they're going to take with them for a lifetime, not only to feel safe, but to be safe as well. So that does it for me. I'm not sure if you'd like any parting words of wisdom or...
His time and you guys being here tonight. So,
Yeah. Awesome, everyone. Yeah. Well,
please write down that